Welcome everyone. This is part of a mini-series of finance and investment-focused webinars that will highlight the opportunities and strategies available for funding the Ag Data Commons and the work that many of our community members are doing. Today, we have a special guest, Renée Vassilos, who joins us to help introduce today's topic and to lead the conversation following the watch party video. Renée is the Nature Conservancy's Director of Agriculture Innovation. She manages TNC investments in innovative companies to help scale regenerative ag production. She spent nearly a decade at John Deere, where she worked across corporate functions and geographies to build global market product strategies, design and manufacture equipment, and marketing and sales. She also started the Banyan Innovation Group, which is a consulting firm that assesses growth stage ag technology startups and investors. Welcome, Renée. We're super excited to have you with us today. And so today's webinar is a watch party focused on developing an action plan for fundraising during COVID times. Renée, if you want to add anything to that before we start the video, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say hello, and I appreciate you guys bringing me in. I see Allison Grantham on here, which is a familiar name. This came about because Dorn and I were talking about how some of your members are really looking for alternatives to what everyone loves to talk about, which is venture capital. Well, venture is very restrictive. It is a very challenging space to play in, and frankly, from what I know about and what Dorn has shared with me, it's really not the type of capital that many of your members are after. So what we're going to watch was put on by Village Capital, and maybe some of you are familiar. They're a startup accelerator incubator that I just really appreciate kind of their focus on supporting the entrepreneurs and thinking differently about how they select those companies that might be successful and are supported moving forward. It's a very collaborative system that they set up. It's quite unique. I haven't seen anyone else following their model. And so they put this on early on in COVID to help their portfolio companies. So they've been around for years. They have a couple dozen portfolio companies. So this was put on for them to just help them and make them aware of alternative financing solutions. So I thought we could watch this. And then the idea was for those in the audience, if there's interest in either one or a couple of the panelists that you're hearing from, we would bring them in for a deeper dive phase 2. So instead of replicating what they did with Village Capital, I thought, let's watch what they did with Village Capital and then take the opportunity to do a deep dive. So maybe a case study with one or two of you and your businesses to say, how could they potentially support your company? So really actually get into some tangibles instead of just kind of the surface level, which I feel like we're always swimming in. So that was the idea. Let's just watch the high level today. And then if there's interest, we do a deep dive into actual tangibles with you guys as the case studies in the future. So that's the idea. Thank you guys for hosting. I appreciate very much what all of you are working on. And let's watch the video. And I'll be on chat. So then the beauty of this live idea is that we're all on chat. So it doesn't have to be a static, we get to be interactive during the video. So thank you for putting on Leah and Tom. I think you guys got tapped last minute. Dorn had an accidental double booking. So thanks to both of you. And yeah, we'll be live on chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Cheryl. Well, on behalf of not just myself, but the other wonderful organizations that we'll get to shortly, welcome everybody to this Pure Money virtual conversation. We're going to be talking about, and really the heart of this conversation is to talk about what is an action plan that founders and entrepreneurs can pursue towards fundraising over the next couple of months, particularly given the global context and everything that's been going on. And so on behalf of myself and my co-hosts, we welcome you and we thank you for making the time, particularly during your busy schedules, to be here. And yes, this will be recorded, and we will share that in addition to other resources as a follow-up to this conversation. And so to get us started, I'd love to introduce the other co-hosts who will be leading this conversation with me. I'll kick it off with myself, and then I'll pass it on to Cheryl and Lindsey and Denisha to do so. So yeah, my name is Marcia Chong, and I lead the Future of Finance practice at Village Capital, which is focused on supporting financial health and fintech startups in the U.S. And have been with the Village Capital team over the past couple of years. And my primary goal is to be supportive towards founders, and can share a little bit more about Village Capital as we get to that. But I'm personally excited to be a part of this and to have come together as a collective group of other wonderful organizations, because really that's what's needed right now, versus trying to support in a siloed way. So with that, Cheryl, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much, Marcia. So everyone, I'm Cheryl Campos. I'm a director at Republic. Republic is a spin out of AngelList that allows anyone to invest in startups, and for startups to raise up to $1 million in capital from anyone around the world. So Istanbul, Luxembourg, anyone can look at the deals on the platform. We have over about 40 companies right now raising, and we this past 3 years alone we have helped 140 companies raise over $40 million. So the average raise is $500K. We have clearly done great strides to make sure that we're also helping underrepresented founders. So 40% of our founders are women and 20% are Black and Latinos. So we're continuing to make sure that we democratize access to fundraising and investing for everyone. And I'm from New York. So anyone here, I saw Bed-Stuy and all of that. So shout out to all of you New Yorkers here.
Awesome. Thanks, Cheryl. Lindsey, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I'm Lindsey Shelley from Lighter Capital here in Seattle. I'm a director on the investment team. At Lighter, we provide non-dilutive loans to software companies. We've lent $165 million to 300 companies in over 600 rounds. My personal background, I've worked in alternative finance for the better part of a decade now, from Main Street to Wall Street and now in tech. So excited to be here and great to have everyone here. Thanks.
Awesome. Denisha, could you introduce yourself?
Denisha might need to be unmuted. I had to be unmuted by a host.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'm Denisha. I'm on the early stage team at Grasshopper. Grasshopper is a digital first venture bank. So we spend our time working with founders and banking their companies, as well as the funds that invest in them. Really excited to be doing this with Republic and Village Capital and Lighter Capital, and looking forward to digging more into financing.
Awesome. Awesome. So as you heard, these will be I will be guiding us through, and in addition to Cheryl, Lindsey, and Denisha, they will be co-hosting this with us. And so let's get more into the actual session and what we will be talking about. So the primary purpose and goals of this conversation is really to start answering a lot of the questions that many of you sent to us in advance. And so we, as Cheryl mentioned, we took a look at all the questions we received. I think we received 120 plus questions. And from that, we were able to bucket those out into common theme areas from founders and others who had asked those questions. And the common theme areas that we received were, one, what are the different types of capital options that are available to me as a founder? Another common question area was around, well, given what are these types, how do I then approach these types of capital sources? And then in addition to that, we saw a lot of questions related to, well, how do I communicate with investors? how do I pursue cold outreach? How do I pursue virtual meetings with them, pitch decks, and a lot of other things. And so the primary goal of this conversation is to really get at, like, what are the capital sources and how can we start to approach them? So you'll hear from Cheryl, Lindsey, and Denisha on things from debt, crowd investing, revenue-based financing, equity, and other alternative and creative solutions, capital solutions to support founders. The other thing that we want to recognize is we also saw a common theme around, there were some industry-specific questions, and this conversation is meant to help answer more on the capital sources and approaching that, but we recognize that there are a lot of other ones that we may not get to in this conversation. We may need to do another webinar or virtual conversation or a series of these conversations, but I would say stay tuned, and thank you all for joining us through this. So we'll talk about the capital sources, how to start approaching them, and then really the heart of this is to get towards that actionable plan. So if at the end of this virtual conversation, what next steps could I take as a founder? So that's really what we're trying to drive this conversation towards, that actionable plan. And then I would also say we're going to have a Q&A portion. So as you're hearing us speak, we encourage you all to start thinking about what are those questions that you want to be asking us as we get to that. And the way that'll work is we'll ask people to write questions in this chat box or chat function. So be thinking about that. We definitely want to hear from you. And then after that, we'll talk about resources and things that we'll share after this conversation. Great. And so next, I'd love for Cheryl to talk a little bit about the capital roadmap.
Yeah, actually, so can people see the slides, by the way? I just want to make sure that people are actually looking at the slides. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
Awesome. Okay, great. So thank you guys again for joining. And we wanted to just put all of us in the spectrum. It is kind of overwhelming to hear all these different capital sources without actually cementing yourself in where you are in your journey as an entrepreneur, right? And we also segmented based off of our RSVPs where people are in their process. There are a lot of people here we want to recognize that are pre-product and pre-revenue. So for those that are here with that, we can talk more later in the Q&A section about other things that you guys should consider. This is more for those that might be in the post-product but pre-revenue, and then also those post-product and post-revenue, right, as sectors. And for those people, we want to make sure that you know where you are. So Grasshopper was there from the very beginning. Once you hit some traction, Republic is there. Same thing for Village Capital a little later when they have their accelerator programs, and they also have a whole a historical VilCap investments fund, and then Lighter Capital comes in a little bit later when you've hit the 200K ARR mark. So just wanted to keep this pretty simple, just so that we all level set in the beginning. And now what we'll do is we'll actually go to Denisha and talk a little bit about Grasshopper and start through the capital continuum.
Awesome. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. Awesome. So like I said, Grasshopper is a digital bank serving founders, their companies, and the investors supporting them. I wanted to talk a little bit about why a bank and ways that you can think of leveraging your bank during this time, as well as our lending products and how we work with companies. So first of all, why a bank? When you think about the roadmap slide that Cheryl just showed, we work with our companies from inception, right? As long as you have an EIN, we're happy to get you set up with a bank account. But for us, the relation extends much beyond, much more than just a bank account. So in the early stage practice, we think a lot about how do we add value to our clients, of course with banking, but also really beyond. And I think the first capacity is our ability to serve as a trusted advisor. So we've definitely been busy these last few weeks navigating PPP, kind of helping founders level set in terms of what we're seeing in market. And then, of course, determining the right course of action as you're thinking through this, either through a fundraise or extending your runway. And really how we like to think about that is through a combination of things. As we are going to see at the rest of this presentation, there's so many ways that you can access capital. And most times it doesn't look like a one size fits all. It's really about putting a combination of things together. And because we do see and work with so many companies who do a layer of things, we can kind of crowdsource our knowledge to really come up with a course of action, or work with you to come up with a course of action that makes sense. Another thing about a bank is when you think about our cost of capital, it's favorable in the sense that we're typically able to offer lower interest rates than what you might see from a debt fund or an investor. So our cost of capital comes from our deposits, therefore your rates would be lower. Now, something I really want to touch on, because we have a lot of pre-product, pre-revenue companies here, is thinking about what is debt risk versus equity risk. So when we think about a bank, we're thinking about how we get paid back. So it's in our best interest to evaluate the deal, or what, financial products we'd be giving from how we're going to be paid back. Now, when you think about equity risk, they are going to want, or an equity investor is going to want, an outsized return. And so as a result, they can invest in, or will most likely to invest in, companies before things have been proven out or de-risked, because it's more favorable, but it's also riskier. And so as you're thinking about this fundraise or raising capital in the next 3 months, you really want to think about what type of risk you're asking and who's going to be the best fit for that type of risk. So if you are pre-product and pre-revenue, that's more likely going to lean into the equity risk category, right? You're going to want investors or partners who are helping you de-risk. And the more the company is de-risked, the better chances you have of securing debt. Now, that's not to say, though, if you have indications, there's a whole host of ways that you can access debt, and we're going to touch on that a little bit more. But it's really important to be thinking about what risk you're asking your financial provider to provide, and as a result, how that's going to affect the structure of the deal. Also, as a bank, we have the ability to be flexible. So a lot of times, sometimes with debt funds or equity, they have a very strict thesis and a fiduciary duty to follow that thesis. We are a regulated bank, so of course we have parameters as well, but we can definitely get crafty around making a deal happen. And like I mentioned before, we're really in it for the long haul. We want to work with you all the way from inception to IPO or M&A. And that really allows us to recommend you to partners, to folks that make sense, even when we're not necessarily the best fit from a debt perspective. So the types of capital that we provide, I'm going to go over this really quickly. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of questions around what are the parameters, or what are the metrics that you want to see. The first thing that I'll say is, while $50,000 is something that we can do, you need to think about your cost of capital. And so to put these facilities in place, not only do we have lawyer fees, but you have lawyer fees as well. So you definitely want to think about if the fees that you'll pay are worth the capital you'll ultimately get in the end. So the types of capital we provide include venture debt. So venture debt is complementary to a venture raise. It's a really great way to extend your runway. Revolving lines of credit, cash flow term loans, asset-based lending, really to finance account receivables and inventory, and then letters of credit. And with that, I just want to reemphasize again, really think through the debt risk versus equity risk, and how. So for example, if you are doing a net new product, that might be hard for us to finance, right? Because there's not proven traction. So think through sometimes where you can incur equity risk, and then sometimes as well pair that with debt risk. So it's not one versus the other, but it's really more so complementary and leveraging the right one at the right time.
Awesome. Thanks, Denisha. Next, I'm going to pass it back to Cheryl. If you could share a little bit more about Republic.
Yes, ma'am. So I think Republic for us, as I mentioned, is really here to help serve founders because prior to the 2016 Title III Jobs Act, we essentially, people that did not have a net worth of $1 million or asset or, an annual income of 200K for the past 2 years couldn't actually invest in startups. That was mind-boggling to me when I first learned about it. But now, we spun out of AngelList in 2016. As I mentioned, we've helped over 140 companies, and the average raise is 500K for 2019. So we essentially give all investors, regardless of wealth or accreditation status, access to these vetted startups. And so these vetted startups are you guys, right? You are the founders, you are really fill out what we like to call the 4 T's, the team, traction, tech, and theme. So team is, what's the team look like? Do they have some sort of experience in the field? Why is it that it's going to, really make a difference? Then it's traction. As I mentioned, we like to kind of have it at the 50K ARR mark as a minimum. That being said, it's, one size doesn't fit all. Sometimes we do accept pre-revenue companies, but that is only when, there's, a notable backing or a notable founder there. Then there's tech. So we like to say tech in terms of more just the product itself. Like, is there a competitive advantage, a defensible moat that might be applicable here? And then last but not least is theme. As I mentioned, we want to make sure that we keep our founders diverse and that we are really taking a holistic picture as to who the startup is and what they're doing. So we want to make sure that, whether it's underrepresented founder, whether it's in a founder in a geographical location that might be overlooked by regular VCs. One thing I want to mention is that we can only serve US companies right now, but we hope to be global at some point. So that being said, we want to make sure that those are the 4 T's to think about: is team, traction, tech, and theme. That being said, less than 2% of companies actually apply, end up actually launching on the platform. So we do have a due diligence process that I can talk about a little bit further down the line if needed, just about how we go about making sure that the business is sound and that, we also have a responsibility to our investor base to bring them the best companies and the best opportunities. One thing I do want to mention is that as a founder, it is also not only just raising capital, but it's really a marketing growth hack. You are putting your company out there to acquire new customers, engage your current customers, really create lifelong brand evangelists that will be there, throughout your journey. So a couple of key details that I want to just emphasize here is, one, this is complementary to other fundraising mechanisms. So you can go to Grasshopper, you can go to VillaCap. We've had 4 VillaCap companies today, which is amazing. You can go to Lighter. So they raise concurrently from all different sources. So this doesn't really limit other types of security offerings. And the way that we do it, so Y Combinator created what's called a SAFE, a simple agreement for future equity. And so we took that SAFE and we made a proprietary one called the Crowd SAFE, which allows all investors to roll up into one line in the cap table, which, imagine if you had 5,000 investors in your Republic campaign. You don't want them all to be stacked on your cap table. So we made sure to keep founders in mind when we did this. So it's one line item. It's extendable, which means that the SAFE doesn't actually convert in the next price round. It actually can convert when the company either IPOs, gets acquired, or is a change in control. So really, like, at a liquidity event. once again, which is great for founders because then you don't have to think about the investors as much unless, you do want to convert them at some point. And then same thing for conversion. You already determined the valuation cap and the discount for the SAFE. And we can go a little bit further into the details. If you want to learn more, I actually put the website on the slide, republic.co/crowdsafe, if you want to get more into the nitty-gritty about how it works. But the last but not least is that there's limited rights on investors. So they really don't have any voting or information rights. So, you won't get a text in the middle of the night asking, where are these financials? So this is something that I think really puts founders first and foremost in mind, especially when fundraising can be so stressful. We want to make sure that you are being supported and we can be a resource to you. So that's Republic.
Thank you, Cheryl, for giving us that overview. Next, I'll share a little bit more about the organization I work for, which is Village Capital. And Village Capital's mission is really to reinvent the system to back the entrepreneurs of the future. And we've been around, I can't believe it, this will be our 11th year. And I would say our organization has been evolving really to meet the needs of entrepreneurs. And so the way that we are reinventing the system to support you all as founders is through three primary ways. One is we directly work and support entrepreneurs through our accelerator programs that are focused on helping entrepreneurs become investment ready. So helping them think through, where am I as a founder in terms of company maturity? What milestones should I focus on next, and what type of capital makes sense based on where I'm at and where I'm trying to grow? And so that's one of the primary ways that we support founders, and we focus on impact-driven pre-Series A startups that are addressing important challenges either in financial health and fintech. Other vertical is our future work, and the other vertical is sustainability. And so those are the types of founders that we support directly through these accelerator programs. In addition to that, I'll talk about the platform and tools piece next. We also support communities of accelerators and investors with tools such as curriculums, tools to help what we call ecosystem builders or community allies better match and support them in their journeys to support their own networks of entrepreneurs and their networks of investors, and better connecting them to each other in terms of resources. So we also have that. And then the last primary way that we are creating the system to support founders is by managing a family of funds. And I'll touch base on this when we talk about the money slide. But Village Capital over the past 10 years, we've also evolved in the way that we manage capital. We started off by having a historical fund managed by our affiliate entity, VillCap Investments, that had made about 110 seed stage investments into companies focused across 5 different verticals. Last year, that fund had finished deploying capital into, the 110th company. And we as Village Capital were thinking, okay, what is the next step towards reinventing this system and coming up with creative ways to support founders? And so where we landed with that is approaching and moving forward with a family of funds that is made up of innovative investment vehicles to support pre-Series A impact-driven companies. And so the first vehicle in that family of funds we recently announced a couple of months ago, and is a partnership with MetLife Foundation, and we're calling it the MetLife Foundation Village Capital Financial Health Fund. And so it will be focused on supporting fintech and financial health, pre-Series A companies primarily through debt and revenue share, with some rare cases of being able to provide equity and convertible debt. And I can talk more about the specific, metrics and conditions for that financial health fund. But it is exciting. There will be, in addition to that financial health fund, other investment vehicles as part of this family of funds. And so in addition to the direct entrepreneur support and our platform and tools, we do provide direct capital to entrepreneurs. And then the last thing I forgot to mention too is in our accelerator programs, particularly because of the current climate and its longer term impacts, we've done a lot of thinking internally about how can we better support our founders through these accelerator programs. And so we will be providing additional grant supports to the entrepreneurs participating through our accelerator programs focused on investment readiness and on peer feedback. Great. So now that you've heard a little bit more about each of our organizations and the way that we seek to support.
Yeah, wait, is Lindsey going next? Ooh.
Yes, and so the last person I'd love to share, which I'm particularly excited about, is Lindsey. If you could share a little bit more about Lighter Capital.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, everybody, for everything you said. I really also want to lift up what Denisha was saying about the differences between debt and equity, because there's like really great times when equity can come in and be a valuable tool for de-risking and getting that seed capital. It also helps with big chunks later in time. But then there's also like the amazing tool of debt to help you grow between rounds. If you're bootstrapping and you need a little bit more cash just to get you to the milestone where it really makes sense to raise the next round. And also in times like this where we're seeing all sorts of crazy stuff happening in the capital markets. We're seeing term sheets get pulled and all sorts of things happening and like valuations changing. And so having a little extra time to get where you want to be can be a super useful tool. So what we do at Lighter, we really sit between your traditional bank loan and equity. Oftentimes the traditional bank loans will have personal guarantees. There's, you put up your house or something alongside those, especially in like a traditional bank. On the equity side, there's dilution components, portions of equity, there's warrants attached to venture debt. And sometimes board seats or other control measures. So what we do at Lighter Capital, we try and put together like a light lift on your end and very low strings attached to the money that we put out. So for us, we've been around for 10 years. The thing that really made the Lighter Capital name was the revenue-based loan. So we put a loan out to the business and we set a total repayment cap. And then the way we recoup the funds of the loan is through it's like a royalty share. It's through a percentage of the revenues that you generate each month. So particularly when there's a lot of uncertainty, there's seasonality. If you're in an industry like ed tech or like you're just like seeing like lots of fluctuations, like you can actually have a loan that changes based on how your revenue changes each month. So that can be like a really great asset, especially if you're in like enterprise, early stage enterprise, and you're getting these like annual upfront contracts and it's super lumpy. So that's what really made the Lighter name. We also offer term loans and lines of credit. So if there's different use cases where wanting to know exactly what the loan payment is each month can be really valuable. And then what other things that we do at Lighter, we primarily work with companies with subscription revenues. So SaaS companies, tech-enabled services, or hardware if you have a subscription component. We size around 3 times MRR. We'll go from 50K. So as soon as you have 15,000 in monthly revenue, you can start working with us. And then we'll size around 3X, starting at 50 all the way up to 3 million. So you can do follow-on loans that will grow with you over time. And we use an objective tech-enabled underwriting process. So that means that we can sort of let you know, quickly, but also transparently. So if we think that there's portions of the risk rating that are like places that are riskier, we can tell you exactly what those are. And a lot of those are key SaaS metrics that by having an understanding of those, you'll be able to, strengthen your company and be able to talk about them knowledgeably about whoever else you're talking to as well. So that's what we do at Lighter.
Thank you, Lindsey. Great. So now that you've heard a little bit more about each of our organizations and the creative and innovative ways that we're supporting founders, would love to introduce what I was referencing a little bit earlier as the money slide. And really what this slide does, it encapsulates and provides a more in-depth summary of the way that each of our organizations deploy capital. And so maybe take a couple of seconds or so to digest and to look at this. We will
screenshot this slide. Just go ahead, stop what you're doing if you change something, but go ahead and screenshot this slide because it really does put into perspective what each one of us look for, our focus, specifically for those that keep asking for certain vertical questions of do you invest in this category, this category. We really break it down here. So. My 2 cents.
I just want to caveat on the company side for us, we don't take personal guarantees as well.
Yay.
Yay. And also as we're, giving people a couple of seconds to digest it, I think what is particularly exciting is you get to see the diversity of different types of capital sources. So knowing, equity is not the only option. There are a lot of other things, to be aware of and to explore if you're a founder in a startup. So I hope that's one of the main pieces that you get from this. And obviously, I know this doesn't answer everything, but it's meant to help you start on that journey towards, exploring these different types of capital sources. Great. So next, I'd love to pass it towards Lindsey, but before I do that, I wanted to provide the overall context. The heart of this conversation is to help everybody in this call or participating in this call with, a recommended action plan. So taking away some of the lessons learned that you've been hearing, whether it is from what we've said, and then even next in the Q&A, what are actual next steps that you could take as a founder as you become more aware about these capital sources and as you navigate and approach them, particularly over the next couple of months. And so all of us have got together and put this collectively as recommended next steps. So Lindsey, I'd love for you to pass it to you if you could share or start sharing some of this.
Absolutely. So we were talking about, what are our tips, and everybody's projections, this year is totally different than everybody thought, 100%. So as you talk to investors, we're everybody's trying to figure out what's new and what's coming next. And so for our first piece of advice for founders is revamp your 2020 projections and get real with yourself about what you need internally within your company and externally from funders to keep moving forward, and button up those diligence materials so you can tell your story clearly with numbers, because that's what everyone's going to want to see. It's we don't know what's going to happen, but we know lots of things are shifting. So there's a moment to revisit everything that you're thinking and just tell that story with numbers, because that's the best way to get somebody on a someone who's offering financing to be on the same level as you is that the numbers are going to pencil, that this is going to work. Also prioritize your energy towards addressing critical milestones and coming up with a fundraising plan based on that. So that might look like debt to get you to the next milestone for equity. The VilCap Abaca tool can help with that. So really think about like, what are those pieces, these things that we've shared with you that will help, actually put together what you need to get to the next step. We're all taking it one day at a time. Yes. Denisha is muted and is going to need to be unmuted by a host. She's taking you
There
through.
we go. Yes.
There you go.
Decide whether this is the right time for your fundraise. This is an interesting one and very nuanced. And I'll say that for a few reasons, right? So this is a very uncertain time for everyone. For investors, they're trying to, one, prioritize their portfolio and see how they can really double down on the companies that they've already invested in. And then also, when you kind of ask in market, there's definitely going to be different sentiment around investors and whether they're still doing deals. I think out of interest, investors will, of course, especially if they do have capital, always say that they're investing just because they do want to make sure that they're not cutting off access to deals, to like a great company to invest in. But you need to think about a few things if you're going to do a fundraise. One, starting a net new fundraise is going to be highly difficult during this time. So if you already have relationships with investors or have been creating relationships with investors, it will be easier. But starting a net new fundraise is going to be difficult. I said difficult, not impossible. It can be done. And there's funds like NFX who have launched a program where companies can apply and they're committed to getting a response in a week. But you should just really be thinking about, to the extent that you can find out that information, where that investor stands or if they're investing. If you do decide to take the route of starting a net new fundraise, I would prioritize the funds that have recently closed a fund. They're going to have the most dry powder. They're going to have the smallest portfolio of existing companies, and they have a fiduciary duty to their LPs to deploy that capital. So they are going to be looking at making deals in this environment. With that being said, also, you really, the trick here, and I think to everything that we've said, is you need to understand the leverage you have as a business. So the revenue you've made so far, your cash position, and kind of where you stand on the risk spectrum, and then figure out what the environment is for the types of capital that you're going to need. And then from there, explore how you can get the most favorable rate or favorable terms. But you do want to really be conscientious that terms and negotiations are going to be a bit tougher at this time, especially on the equity side. Now, evaluating what capital source is right for you, I touched on this, but I think it really comes down to research, and having those conversations. We might do a deal or offer you terms, and it might be more favorable somewhere else, or vice versa. You want to really take a look at your full spectrum of options, and you're not going to be able to seriously evaluate them or really understand whether you qualify and what that looks like unless you have terms. So to the extent that you can get to a conversation where there's some sort of terms, I would encourage you to do so and evaluate, and also evaluate from a long-term partner perspective. In this time, I think it's more important than ever to really work with companies that can be a partner to you and firms that can be a partner to you. So you really want to make sure that you're doing proper evaluation, and you can't do that if you leave options on the table.
Great. Well, it seems like there was a lot going on in the chat to discuss here. So, Renee, I'm going to have you take it away.
And I guess we didn't get to hear their Q&A at the end.
Yeah, so Tom is good. We'll send out a little bit of information once the meeting is over with the Q&A. The full video will be attached to that.
Cool. We can't hear you, Renee.
Oh, Renee, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I was trying to do a little bit of reverse classroom, right? So like we watch the video, we have a chat, and then we could do a live version. So I thought everyone could watch their Q&A independently if you wanted, if it's of interest. So yeah, I guess maybe what would be helpful, I'm just looking, it seems like Derek and Steve, you're on the same team. Is that right? And then I don't know who else is on the call and what they're doing, but yeah, would love to chat. I mean, I think Steve and Derek, you were engaged. How are you looking at capital, and or are you even looking to raise capital? Or
yeah, so Tech Matters is a nonprofit, and so we and funded essentially entirely at this point by grant funding, although we're trying to create digital goods, open source technology, which through sort of cost recovery fees will become self-supporting over time, right? So our goal, our basic model is to try to create systems change by looking at problems that are not organizational but multi-organizational, typically international in scope, and try to build technological infrastructure that can help an entire field rather than one particular organization. So Tech Matters has two projects right now. One is child helpline infrastructure. So there's 147 child helplines around the world, and we're trying to build a common communications infrastructure for those helplines so they don't have to all roll their own and sort of start from scratch. And within this, more of this OpenTEAM community, our focus is on trying to build technology resources for what we call local landscape leaders. So people who live and act within a community for the community's benefit and are trying to build sustainable development projects within that community, often agriculture, because the reality of course is ag, but small medium-sized businesses, new enterprises, trying to affect extractive industries, and so forth. So OpenTEAM is, and the OpenTEAM activities within agriculture are a major focus of that initiative. So all of our money today is grants. As I say, our goal is to build these into sustainable enterprises that are funded, ongoing expenses are funded by user fees in a model where wealthy country users might pay more than their share and vice versa. In order to be achievable. My comments during the presentation were primarily driven with an entirely different hat on, which is before I joined Tech Matters to work on this nonprofit project, I was and still am on the board of 3 or 4 for-profit startups in various technology areas. And so, for example, we've issued SAFEs, this agreement for future equity, as a way to manage your cap table for small businesses. As I noted, I've invested on Republic. So Republic is cool because you can pretend like you're a venture capitalist and invest $200 here and $500 there, and and feel like you're on top of the world. And then with some of these companies that I've been involved in the board of directors, we've pursued things like lighter capital, and so this is only my opinion, right? But lighter capital and those other companies that they compete with, they're still in a pretty risky business. And as was conveyed generally, people that lend you money don't like risk, right? And so they've created this interesting model where it looks and acts like a loan, but they still have a fair amount of risk, which they try to control through various ways. But the effective interest rate you are still paying today, I would say, is probably 15%. So, we hear about 0% interest rates and 2% interest rates. But what bothers me about lighter capital and the people that they compete with, they're all pretty much in the same range, is that I don't feel that they're honest in telling you the interest rate. If you go to Lighter Capital's website and go to their FAQ page, and one of the questions is, I don't know, one of the questions is basically, what's the interest rate? And they don't answer the question, right?
Well, yeah. So I would say yeah, there's no such thing as free money. But the only reason they're able to create, or why they even are able to dabble in this more risky loan operation, is because of all the rest, right? Like, it's because of all the zero risk capital that they've got. And then this environment that we have is just that they're sitting on so much money that they have to be thinking more creatively about how they're actually lending it. So I hear you, but I think there is still a reason that lighter capital now exists. It's because
Absolutely.
of the current environment. And for some companies, I mean, compared to venture, compared to as extractive as venture is, I still think for some companies, it might be a very interesting option. Eyes wide open. So not
Yes.
saying, you know,
Yes.
really being aware of what it is, and hopefully having great board members like yourself to really guide. That's absolutely critical. But we have 5 minutes left. I'd love, Derek, it sounded like maybe this isn't your comfort zone or your world. Any questions that you have from this data dump?
You're right. This is not really my comfort zone, but it's something I'm very interested in learning about. Yeah, I mean, my interest is trying to understand how the different people that we're trying to support get access to financial support. And obviously, a lot of the companies that were represented in this webinar are US focused. A lot of the people that we're trying to support are not. So still, their questions remain, but you know, the instruments, perhaps there's analogs in other countries, and understanding these concepts is useful for me. So no particular questions beyond, you know, where should I learn more?
I would say if you're looking kind of for kind of new tech that's coming down the pike that does cover more emerging markets, the MIT Solve community has some really interesting startups and new business models and areas that they're exploring. So that might be a place I would just take a look. I was a member this year. I can't remember. I have to admit, I was really focused. They had a food systems one. And so they really didn't, those solutions didn't focus on fintech, but I think there was also a fintech prize or, you know, like cohort. If not this year, certainly last year. And so there might be just some interesting things to look at there in terms of how emerging markets are being served more creatively. Because you're absolutely right. There's some analog, and then there's just some things that aren't tracking and are totally irrelevant for emerging markets. Yeah, actually, I think the emerging markets are totally leapfrogging. I was based in Beijing for 6 years. I used to pay my rent with a backpack full of cash. And I went back 3 years ago, and like I literally was handicapped because I didn't have a Chinese bank account, and everything was done on WeChat. I mean, it was crazy. So that was like, wow. And then the same in Thailand. I mean, you're seeing it also in the Philippines, and yeah. So while some things are the same, there's a lot that's really shifting so fast. Yes, and Derek, that's it. That's the Solve MIT. So again, I can't remember if it was this year or last year's cohort, but there were some that were looking at like earlier stage emerging market focused fintech solutions. So I think it sounds like, Steve, you're pretty well versed. I guess maybe we had hoped to get some more folks that didn't know about, you know, what are the options out there. But like you said, Steve, I think Village Capital is phenomenal. I mean, they threw this together right as COVID was hitting to support their portfolio companies, and I have so appreciated the language that the ladies were using. It was very layperson. I often find when I talk to investors, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And I just found that they really were very direct and transparent. So I just very much appreciate this. I've used it several times already, and I think I'll continue to use it as just kind of a 101 because I haven't seen it anywhere else. So that was the intention. There is a link in the chat to a post-meeting survey. I think many of you were quiet, but we were thinking to do a phase 2 of this, kind of a deep dive. And if there is interest, please let us know through that survey. And thank you for your time this afternoon. Kind of an unusual structure we tried out, but I really appreciate Steve and Derek, your engagement, and Tom and Leah for supporting on the backside. So thanks all very much.
Thank you, Renee, for coming and for being here.
Yes.
Thank you a lot.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.